Hey, got a question for you. Do you or have you ever felt like you've got a word, a prompting, a nudge from God? Many people respond to that prompting, nudge, word with action. I want to share with you that there are 3 things you need to do before you move on any word you think you got from God. Stay tuned. Listen, it is a Christian social norm, I think, for people to articulate promptings, nudges, hunches that they feel like they got from God. And I obviously believe in the reality of God speaking. I see it scripturally. I did a video earlier that's on this page somewhere where I talk about biblically the number of different ways we see God speaking in scripture. Inaudibly, we see him speaking through the scriptures, obviously. So he speaks through the scriptures, he speaks through the saints, he speaks by his spirit, and by his spirit that's inaudibly, that is through our intuition, hunches, nudges, promptings that we shouldn't quench, right? And God can also use experiences, like he used a whale to speak to Jonah. So when Jonah was swallowed by the whale didn't say, like verbally, you need to turn around and go in the other direction. But the whale was saying, you need to turn around and go in the other direction. So I believe in that. My life bears the fruit of that. The reason I ended up not going to law school and going to seminary was because of one of those promptings. The reason I planted a church was because of one of those promptings. Where I've planted churches have been in response to those promptings. But before I've just leaped out on a word, there are 3 steps I've learned to take. And I want to share those steps with you because these steps, I think, are very key steps that will help us make sure we're not stepping into foolishness in the name of walking by faith. This is important, right? Because I think it's possible, or I think it's necessary to trust that God can and does and will speak to us. Like that, it's important to believe that. But we also don't need to have that same level of trust in our ability to hear right. I believe I have way more confidence in his ability to speak than I do in my ability to always hear. So here are 3 steps that I think everyone should walk through when it comes to stepping out on a word from God. Number 1 is a step called revelation. And that is just simply me coming to a degree of awareness regarding what God is saying. So whether that is a prompting, whether that is an inaudible voice, whether that is intuition, it is my hearing, discerning, sensing God leading me to some course of action. That's revelation. I believe God's talking to me about something right now. I believe God says start this. I believe God says say that. I believe God says go there. I believe God says write this. That is revelation. Revelation is simply disclosure. It's like, okay, man, I've become clear that God is speaking. Now, here's what happens. Very often, people take revelation and they go right into action. And there are 2 more steps that you need to go through. Because after you move from revelation, I have a sense of what God, or that God saying something. And I have a sense of what I heard him say. The second step is interpretation. Revelation asks the question, what did he say? Interpretation asks the question, what did he mean? See, just because I heard what he said doesn't mean I'm accurately interpreting what he means. I want to give you an example of this. Jeremiah 1 records God speaking to Jeremiah. And one of the ways he's speaking to Jeremiah is through prophetic visions, dreams. And so he puts these dreams in the heart of Jeremiah, and then he asks him this question. He would ask him, tell me, what do you see? And Jeremiah would articulate what he's seen, and God would respond to Jeremiah by saying, you've seen well. Does that make sense? So He's saying, hey, it's one thing, Jeremiah, for you to say you see what I'm showing you. It's another thing for you to accurately interpret what you see. So Jeremiah's articulation back to God regarding what he saw was God's way of vetting to see how good a job Jeremiah was doing in interpreting the message. And this is a step that it is easy to skip if I'm being pushed by pride. So there's this term, and it's not a spiritual term at all, but it applies to our spiritual lives. It's a term called epistemological humility. Epistemology deals with knowledge. So you put those things together. So it's like humility about knowledge. So it's really this concept that the more knowledgeable a person actually becomes, the more humble they should be. Right? Because the more you know, the more you get to, the more you discover what you don't know. So there should be a degree of humility that we hold our knowledge with, because as much as I know, there might be something about this that I don't know. So I can hold firm to it and I can have a deep conviction about a certain thing. Yet at the same time, I shouldn't operate with an aura of arrogance about that. Because it's possible that I misunderstood something. It's possible that I misinterpreted something. It's possible that the information that I got is inaccurate. And it is possible that I can hear what God say and not know what he means. Listen, when you get better spiritually, everything get better. Spiritual life is not the only important part of your life. It is the most important part of your life because it affects every other part that's important. But you don't get stronger spiritually accidentally. It takes intentionality. You need to get fed, and you got to learn how to understand, how to interpret, how to apply, and how to explain the Bible. The Bible's the blueprint to your best life. And I'm going to tell you, Sunday's not enough to give you the tools that you need to get better with the Bible. I want you to join me in my community called Bible U, where I help you take your understanding, your application, and your explanation of the Bible to another level. I'm going to give you a prime example of this. Right. Part of what I've had the privilege of doing during my time in ministry of serving people is to walk people through a process of discerning, like calling. And it's such a great privilege. I think God involves community in different ways in that process. For some people, it's heavy isolation like Paul, but when Paul came back from isolation, there was confirmation from the Christian community. In Acts 13, Paul wasn't actually released until wasn't released in the ministry until Acts 13, when the Holy Spirit said, set aside Paul and Barnabas for the work that I've assigned him. But let's just say there have been times where people have they're discerning a calling, and here's what they hear. They hear pastor. And then they immediately go into action because they've interpreted that pastor means do what I do. And then they go into that line of ministry, that part of the vineyard, and they don't see fruit, and they don't see fruitfulness. And it is confusing, it is deflating, it is frustrating, and it can cause people to question, did I hear God wrong? It's like, no. You got the revelation right. You got the interpretation wrong. Maybe he didn't mean start a church. Maybe he meant shepherd a community. Wow. Maybe he meant shepherd your neighborhood. Maybe he meant shepherd your son's basketball team. Someone can hear a word, leave, and they can think that word means, okay, leave this thing. And sometimes leave doesn't mean leave now. Yeah, right? Sometimes leave means leave the way you're doing a thing, not a thing. So I got to get revelation. Then I need accurate interpretation. And accurate interpretation requires counsel and community. In the multitude of counsel, there is safety. I'm going to say that again. Accurate interpretation requires community, a tribe, and counsel. In the multitude of counsel, there's safety. And then the third step is application. So revelation asks the question, what did he say? Interpretation asks the question, what did he mean? Application asks the question, what is the wisest way to do this? So there are times when people get the revelation right, they get the interpretation right, they get the application wrong. It's like God said, leave. I get interpretation that means to leave literally. But then when it comes to the application, I just walk in and tell everybody to go to Gehenna. Go to Gehenna, everybody. It's like, okay, you missed the application there. You burned bridges unnecessarily. You compromised your witness unnecessarily. The way in which you did it wasn't wise. So because of my calling in the marketplace, I deal with a lot of faith-based entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And very often I get this question so much. Hey, I'm feeling like whether it's an entrepreneurial endeavor or whether it's a gap ministry endeavor, like a parachurch ministry endeavor, something ministry-wise, I feel like I need to transition from my quote-unquote job to this full-time. And so I always tell people, hey, when you have a word, the word is wisdom. But when you don't have a word, use wisdom. And one of the things that I say is, hey, all right, there are times where you got to leave a lake to tend to your stream if your stream has the potential to be a lake. But if not, and if you're not clear on that, and if you don't have a word on that, stay in your lake until your stream becomes a lake. And then you transition from your stream. From your lake. You transition from one lake to another because your streams become a lake. Or there are times when someone has a word, that's what I tell them to do. But generally speaking, what I'm encouraging most people to do is like, yeah, you may want to leave that job, but for most people, I probably wouldn't recommend that they leave a job because it's like the likelihood, now God does do unique things, but the likelihood that everyone is going to go from a lake to a stream and turn that stream into a lake is the likelihood that that's going to happen is it's not unlikely, but it is not abnormal for that not to happen because some things are supposed to be streams and we try to make them into lakes. And God's like, the way increase is actually going to come into your life is through multiple streams. That's the point, right? So that's what actually gives you increase. And so sometimes people feel like, I'm called to entrepreneurship. And it's like, yep, you're called to both. Entrepreneurship. So you're using that acumen, the skills, and the ability inside of something that already exists that you're a part of, even if you don't own it. And then you're also utilizing those entrepreneurial skills in other things that you are doing. That's creating a stream of service to other people, but also a stream of income to you. Oh, that's application. So I need revelation, I need interpretation, and I need right application. And these are 3 steps I should take before I take any step of faith in the name of a word from God. All right. Take care. God bless.